Well, I've seen about 15, nearly 20 minutes of this. It'll go on about Trump a bit, and then it gets into what he's talking about. Touches on some really, really enlightening things about how we are policing, how we are actually, with our double down, zero tolerance and prejudices, are creating all our own problems for ourselves, which is what I've been trying to say for ages. He talks about more of a socialist approach than a communist approach. This guy gets the difference. Scott Lucas. Why experts are sounding the alarm on Trump and the media are noticing. I know. Go away, maggots. There's something wrong with you. Until you learn to self-reflect, you're not the adult in the room. Regardless of what you claim that you are, you're not.
Clearly just does not have it together. He's just rambling. He absolutely cannot put together coherent thoughts.
My guest is Professor Scott Lucas, a highly experienced and globally renowned expert in American politics, US and British foreign policy, and a wide range of international affairs.
Trump gives a speech where he just simply is insulting people in the guise that he's supposing telling jokes. And he's wearing the Trump 2028 hat, and people are going, okay, is he joking or is he serious? And the point here is, he's both. This is what you have to do with Trump. You have to, when you break down Trump, you have to take Trump apart in terms of how the man operates. If Donald Trump could find a way to run for a third term, he would.
With specific focus on the Middle East, Iran, Europe, and Asia. He also has expertise in the new media, intelligence services, and propaganda.
The Trump folks were successful at doing is poisoning the discussion around rights and responsibilities to talk about how the real problem was woke, DEI, critical race theory, and specifically men playing women's sports. Now, instead of calling that out, which is what should be called out, I saw too many pundits and analysts. They fall into this trap and they're going, yeah, we've got a serious problem with identity politics in America. It's like, piss off.
He has also been an active journalist since 1979 and is the founder and editor-in-chief of EA Worldview, a prominent news site that provides daily news and analysis of global affairs.
And you've got to have a society which can go beyond the headline and function, because any good business doesn't work on a day-to-day cycle when they do their business planning. They function on 3-year, 5-year, 10-year plans. The same thing with analysis. You have to realize is that Trump creates an imbalance in what happens with the media, and that is...
The UK Parliament is pushing legal measures that would literally and directly fight against the existence of independent journalists, independent media outlets like retortmedia.com and indeed this podcast. If these measures do successfully go through Parliament, we are at a much higher risk than ever before to be shut down and even blocked from YouTube, TikTok, and all social media. That's why I need your support. Please make sure you subscribe on retortmedia.com/support. Provide us with whatever financial support you can. You can become a member, or you can donate anything from $1 to $10,000 if you want. It's entirely up to you. But this is the only way we can stay connected together, because Retort Media is not hosted in the UK or in the United States, but in Europe. So we are protected in there. And the only way we can continue and for us to stay connected is for you to subscribe on retortmedia.com/support. Please do that as soon as you possibly can. And I appreciate your support. Now let's get back to the episode. Scott, welcome back. How are you doing?
Yeah.
In the current heat wave. You don't have heat waves up there in Ireland, do you?
We don't have heat waves in Ireland, man. Exactly. It's like the one blessing of living here is we don't get like Florida weather, California weather, but like we don't burn up either. But it's been great here the past couple of weeks. The thing I've learned about living here is we enjoy our 2 weeks, and then we're not going to get it again until March. So we better make the most of it while we can.
Yeah, your winter is terrible, isn't it? Your winter is like
Yeah, it is.
Windy. Yeah, I know.
Yeah,
I know.
that's where the wife says she's fleeing back to Birmingham. It's like, oh, okay, come on. All right then. We'll see you in April.
We shall see in April. But speaking of wet and windy, Donald Trump had some very interesting statements and behaviors in the last 2 weeks. And I should actually make a point as well, because I know you had that comment on your channel, EA Worldview, and you had 1 hour in here, that the episode that we published last Monday was a little bit, quote unquote, out of date. Now, the thing I want listeners to understand that, because we don't necessarily do breaking news, and I think sometimes breaking news is important. Let's say if you're watching the markets, whatever, especially if you invested in SpaceX, you absolutely need it to be good on the news because you're losing a lot of money. But I feel that part of the clickbait problem is the breaking news, is the idea that, hey, breaking news, this happened. Suddenly, 5 seconds later, another breaking news, this happens. And to me, it distracts people. I feel it's like they think that something happens today, by tomorrow they forget about it. And I think what
I have an analysis of my own on this. There's too many of me around. Except the problem with too many of me around is over opinion in one way or the other, when I'm kind of like, you really need to meet in the middle somewhere. Right? I'm trying to mediate this a bit. Far too many people claiming to be independent media that are clearly pushing a party or a narrative or negative, putting a negative spin on something to piss people off can also work in advantage for the person that they're pretending to be against, like Tony Tonkin. Tony Tonkin is offering you no solutions, no pragmatic or intelligent alternatives. It's just red hair bad. Like how well did that work for Orange Man bad? It worked really well, didn't it, for Orange Man? People start thinking, oh, you're just being a Trump basher. That's what Tony Tonkin's up to. See? But because you're so caught up in the hamster wheel and in the echo chamber and being gaslit, you don't realise you're actually being pushed in that direction. Psychological warfare 101 is done by media and propaganda. For every thesis, you need an antithesis so that you can get the synthesis in the middle of what they are trying to achieve. Helplessness. They want you to feel helpless. They want you to feel that there's no hope, no way out of it. Why? Because it stops you from getting up off your ass and creating your own hope, helping yourself and getting yourself out of it. So even those who aren't pushing a party line are pushing against a party line. Tell me again that you're not operating for the system while you're operating for the system?
Proven beautifully in our last episode, actually, that even though it was slightly out of date, but every point that you highlighted is still relevant today. To an extent that, of course, we can talk about the Iran war again, but what's new? It's literally the same. As you highlighted, it's a limbo. We'll continue seeing this. Does it matter if it's a breaking news or not? I don't know. But also, because we talk a lot about Iran, there's so much that is happening that nobody else is talking about, and it's equally dangerous and equally important. Which is the reason why I thought, let's talk about Trump today, because in the last couple of weeks, I mean, Jesus, mate, what the hell? It's like, I'll let you start. I mean, where do you want to start with him? I mean, Jesus.
I mean, and this is part of the challenge of actually dealing with Trump, because we very easily could be thinking, Oh, he said this just this morning, and indeed he was. I think he was actually yesterday morning. He was on with Fox and Friends and said some nonsensical stuff, and then he met Ukraine President Zelensky, Israel Prime Minister Netanyahu. So that was going on, and then he goes off. And this morning, actually, he's tweeting, right? So, when you discuss Trump, you have to be careful not to just simply do the latest thing he's done, because he's deliberately trying to lead people by the nose. I mean, the guy is mentally and physically unwell. We'll talk about that. But he's still very, very cunning. And he's very, very cunning in that showman sense. That's where he succeeds, which is, I'm going to take over the news cycle. And so if you just simply go with his latest statement, you're just following his lead on news cycle. And that means what he might have said 48, 72 hours ago last week, which may have lasting importance, that's gone. That's already gone out there, right? So I guess to use this as a test case to talk about where we are with Trump is, a few days ago, the set piece was the White House Correspondents' Dinner. Now, this is the annual gathering, and it used to be an occasion where journalists, they're there with the politicians, they're there with officials, and we can have another video cast on that relationship, that journalism is not always to hold people to power, truth to power. These people run in the same social networks, right? So they all get together for a get together, but it still used to be an occasion where you would have a very good comedian who would come up and he would poke fun at the president and at people in the room. Even the president of the day would get up and would poke fun at others in the room in like a lighthearted way. Probably what has become one of the most famous occasions when Barack Obama in 2011 gave a great, fun-loving speech. But one of the targets of his humor was a guy named Donald Trump, who was there in the audience, who apparently didn't take it so well, which is one thing that fueled his desire to then run for president. But anyway, what has happened is it's become a corrupted event, in that it's become another Trump ego event. So you no longer have that comedian that opens the occasions, because during Trump's first term, he got furious with a couple of them. They were awful. They made too much fun of him. And so that's gone. And then the set piece is now a presidential speech in which the president's trying to tell jokes, but in fact, this was just Trump insulting people, right? And so you had this bizarre spectacle that he also, because of course you have to have awards. It's Trump. He's handing out awards to these journalists, and then a few minutes later, he's saying that they're trash. Right? He literally said that about Caitlin Collins from CNN. So in that sense, it's become that part of that corrupted spectacle that you and I talked about earlier this year, when we talked about July the 4th, America 250 corruption took place. And the other overlay on this is, of course, that the White House Correspondents' Dinner a few months ago had to be postponed because a guy rushed security. He didn't get close to any of the folks. They were down in the ballroom far below. But it was still like, oh, is this another attempted assassination? Yeah. And Trump immediately says, oh, we have to have the next event in the ballroom that I built it. This is why we have to build the ballroom, for security, blah, blah, blah. Before the rationale became, we have to have the ballroom because it has a military bunker. Anyway, the event takes place in, I think, the Waldorf Hotel, and it's going on. And then Trump gives this speech where he just simply is insulting people in the guise that he's supposedly telling jokes. And he's wearing the Trump 2028 hat, and people are going, okay, is he joking or is he serious? And the point here is, he's both. This is what you have to do with Trump. You have to, when you break down Trump, you have to take Trump apart in terms of how the man operates, and don't just get led by the nose of what's happening. And that is, if Donald Trump could find a way to run for a third term, he would. He would. He already says he's a third-term president because he always claims falsely he won the 2020 election, blah, 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 right? But Trump is still cognizant enough to know that he is barred by the Constitution from running for a third term. And you would absolutely have to trample on the Constitution to do it. Now, it's like, I don't think he can get around that. But the point here is, he grabs news cycle because everybody's now talking about Trump 2028, Trump 2028. And I'm like, well, guys, I'm more interested in the congressional midterms of 2026. here because I think these are really, really important elections that he's going to try to manipulate, and off we go. So you had Trump trying to suck up oxygen with this event, and everybody, of course, because it was the White House correspondents, they cover themselves. So they're all writing about the dinner the next day. And some of them are trying to make it seem like kind of a normal event. Trump gets his own back. Trump jabs at the media, whatever. Instead of saying, this guy clearly just does not have it together. He's just rambling. He absolutely cannot put together coherent thoughts. And so again, I'm working, I think it was night before last. So we're recording on a Wednesday. And on a Monday, I got called up by London radio station. And they said, Trump's giving a statement. Will you come on air afterwards and talk about what he said at the presser? And I'm like, yeah, okay. Yeah. It was a rally, sorry, to be precise. It's a rally in Michigan. He's at an automobile factory, and it's all about how he's been so great for the economy and cars and so on.
Yes.
And bless him, after, I was there expecting I'd have to sit through an hour of Trump before they would call me. And, and I've got it on the computer with my earpiece in, so my wife can actually watch proper TV, which is one of her favorite crime shows, right? And I'm going, okay. But after 10 minutes, I get this message that said, let's just do the interview now. He's not saying anything new. And I'm like, he's absolutely right. But what was striking about that first 10 minutes is, and it's like, okay, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to get behind what he's saying. First of all, he insulted Ronald Reagan because he talked about how, Ronald Reagan, supposedly, Republican president, blah, 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 blah. But Ronald Reagan, he let all the cheap cars in from Japan and from Germany. So in the first couple minutes, he's already trashed like this Republican icon, Ronald Reagan, which tells you the signal. If you're Trump doesn't believe in the Republican Party. Trump doesn't believe in that party and what he doesn't know the history of it and what it's done. And it's not a question of Trump agreeing or disagreeing with the Republican Party. He trashes the Republican Party because he wants a Trump party, a party that's loyal to him. Then the next thing that, that he comes out of his mouth is he comes out and says, we've got and here I am at this plant in Michigan, and yay to the workers. And we're building the most car factories ever in American history. And I'm immediately checking that. And I'm going, dude, no. Come on. Because I'm a kid. I was born in 1962. And America was like this car culture. We were building masses of cars from the 1920s all the way through the 1950s. That's what made America America. We didn't have mass transport, rather. And so, yeah, sure enough, if you go back, like the most car factories that operated in the United States were in that period. It's not in 2026. Then he's talking about the tariffs. And Joe Biden, he couldn't get any money for the United States. He got less than $1 trillion a year in trade for the United States. I brought in $19 trillion of investment in the United States. Well, no, you didn't. That's like half the U.S. GDP in 2026. You did not bring in $19 trillion. What you had is you had some countries who have given you we'll invest some money. Sure. The Saudis did it. UAE did it, and so on. And then he just goes out and says, it's $19 trillion. Because Trump just makes up numbers. All of it. And so what you had this was a speech which had no substance in it whatsoever. There was no new economic policy that was there. There was no addressing of the realities of inflation. There was no addressing of the realities of the job market, which in some respects is at its weakest point since 2009, or that in June, the job market was expected to add about 120,000 jobs. It only added 56,000, which shows that the market's weak. And the point here is Trump's not going to make substantive points because that would mean he would have to address the real issues, which aren't all rosy for him. So he's going to completely change the narrative and go off on his turf.
Good boy. Now sign this divorce paper. My daughter is remarrying someone who doesn't smell like dirt.
I spent all my savings on this spaceship. How could you treat me like this? I will build a powerful fleet and make all of you my servants.
And where that builds in terms of what I'm looking at, we can go back and talk a little bit. They're having a few developments on Iran, so we can pick up in a bit. But if you're talking about domestically, if you run up to November's speech or November's elections, the Trump folks cannot run on economic success. They can't if they were going to address this factually. Inflation is up over 4%. So it's higher than it was at the end of Biden's term. because Biden and the Federal Reserve and the administration had brought it down from 9% to around 3%. You can't run on jobs. You can't run on a significant increase in real wages. You can't run on a significant increase in manufacturing, and you can't run on the tariffs, because the tariffs, which of course are a tax on American consumers, first and foremost, and then manufacturers and farmers. But they haven't brought in that much money, first of all, because they didn't bring in as much as Trump claimed. And secondly, the Supreme Court invalidated them back in February when they said they weren't legal. So if you can't run on that, right? Interestingly enough, in Michigan, and I may have been in this because, like I said, I only had to listen to 10 minutes of that stuff. And I just looked at a summary of the rest of the speech from Aaron Rupert, who was fantastic because he just put sound bites up later. But I didn't see him coming in on immigration that much. They can't run on immigration because most people, a majority of Americans oppose the way they're going about dealing with immigration, even if they agree you should do something about immigrants, right? So what do you run on? Well, the bulk of it, the word that was in that speech over and over again was communist. All these communists that are threatening America. And I'm sitting here, and he's clearly thinking of Mamdani in New York. Mamdani's really upset him. I'm really upset. But he's like, the communists, they're going to come take your houses. So like, okay, communists don't allow houses. They're going to come take your cars. And okay, no cars, right? As he sits in this automobile factory, 80% tax, which is, I thought he might say 100%, but at least they'll leave you 20% of your money, whatever it is. There's no police, there's no prisons. And I'm like, oh Christ, and he's just all over the shop. And it's like, dude, I wasn't there.
Listen real carefully to what he says just here. Think about how much it relates to us here in Australia with that idiot Pauline, who's also like, I don't know, it's like they mashed together all the dumber and dummerists and painted them orange and red, and off they went. And everyone's chasing shiny objects. Oh, look, ooh, like a bunch of bowerbirds. Regardless of how stupid they are. Listen to what he talks about with police and stuff here. And put your idiot prejudices away. Put them away first. Take a breath. All right.
In the 50s, I wasn't there during McCarthyism. I came along pretty soon after that. But I know from folks who lived through McCarthyism what it meant in terms of like tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of Americans who got blacklisted from jobs, who got accused of being communists, what it meant, not just the film industry, which we hear about, but in terms of manufacturing jobs, in terms of getting fired from agricultural jobs, getting fired from the financial sector, right? Getting fired from teaching posts. This is like a really nasty period of American history.
You will not find a bigger opposer of communism than a Nazi, which is the most extreme form of communism you can think of. Yeah. No, they're not the same because Nazism is way worse. But they want to try and put socialism and communism in the same basket, and they're not. They're not. They're just not. It's a flip-flop reversal of each other.
And because the Trump folks can't run on the economy or immigration in 2026, they're going to try to take us back to that. And in fact, and it's interesting because the tactic in 2020 and even 2024 was culture wars, right? Yeah. No DEI, no woke politics, no transgender people. They're not even sure they can make that one stick. They've decided they're going to go for communism. And so that's the way, I'm reading the speeches is that will America, this isn't a right-left question, Democrat, Republican, will America be grown up enough to say, look, this is just a shtick. There are no communists. I can't think of a single communist who holds a local, state, or national office in the U.S. right now, right? I can't think, the Communist Party of the United States, I think technically still exists, but you'd be hard to find it. And mainstream American culture. There just simply isn't. It's not like we're back in the 1950s versus the Soviet Union, but this is what they're going to try to run with. Now, I will say this as well, because you and I talked about the Democrats last time, and I've just put that up as that'll be our Instagram reel for tomorrow. Can the Democrats win in 28? And one thing I'll say is I went and I did check the Democratic Socialists of America. And I do think this highlights a challenge for the Democrats going forward. And it's important to not just make this about Trump. Zoran Mamdani has not gotten rid of the New York Police Department. He has not gotten rid of New York's jails. He has not seized houses in New York. He has not done. His crime is trying to provide for cheaper transport, cheaper childcare, cheaper housing, grocery stores in neighborhoods, and if you want to call that communist, whatever. We discussed that last time. But the Democratic Socialists of America, their co-chair, bless her cotton socks, because the thing about activists quite often is, and they really mean well, but they don't do pragmatic politics. Either Fox or Newsmax, one of those right-wing hack outlets, got her on and said, "Do you want to get rid of the United States Senate?" And she said, "Yes." Now, there is a case, by the way, there is a historical case why you get rid of the U.S. Senate, and I won't talk you through that. But the argument is that the Senate is undemocratic because it's not based on population size. Like every state gets 2 senators, no matter how big or small they are. The counter argument by that, to the way, is that it protected small states. They don't get run over by the large states, but that's taking us into the weeds. But anyway, it's not that nonsensical for her to say, get rid of the U.S. Senate. And, when they said, "Are you going to not just defund the police? Are you going to get rid of the police?" And she goes, "Yes, eventually." I'm going, "No, you can't do that." Okay, I'm sorry. I mean, look, you cannot get rid of the police. I mean, and it's not just because my grandfather was like 36 years in the force. You just can't. There is a legitimate case for having police in our communities. "Are you going to get rid of prisons?" "Yes." No, you can't. You can make a case that we need to reduce the number of people in prisons by dealing with, for example, victimless crime should not be prosecuted to the extent it is. For example, drug offenses. We could make the case that there needs to be more effective rehabilitation programs in prisons, that it's not just simply a system for punishment. We could talk a lot about how the prison system has been racially prejudicial charts, all that we could talk about. But just to simply say, get rid of prisons, one, I actually don't agree with that. And two, you can imagine what Donald and his people, when they say communists want to get rid of prisons, they'll point to this poor woman who went on there. And even though she's not a communist, she's a democratic socialist, she's just played into their hands.
Absolutely. So how do we get more prisons? We tell everybody that everyone wants to get rid of more prisons, and everyone hops up and down, no, we need more prisons. The more victimless crime get turned into actual criminals at the stroke of a pen that haven't hurt anybody. Ha! Right? Which is not a crime at all. It's probably just a mistake. Probably just a poor choice. Probably someone who just needs a hand, needs a help, needs someone to talk to, needs some guidance, needs some mentorship. Let's look around here locally. When I say this all the love and respect in the world, I'm going to drop a couple of names. Let's look at Aaron Brennan. Let's look at Tony Brown. The fella and the Sheila. Been homeless for God knows how long. Tony's struggles with life altogether. God. Prostitutes herself out for drugs. Aaron's in and out of jail. Almost had it together here a while back. The police went and lick tested him in Coles supermarket. Not knowing what was going to happen, just young cops, just cockheads. That could have gone any which way. That could have gone any which way but loose. Like, gee, I don't know, a game of dominoes with the shells falling over on top of everybody. It's just dumb. It's stupid. I'm just here now. I just watched one drug deal happen out the front. There's another one going on just up the road here. Two separate places, two separate people. I'm just watching it right now. Youngins, their lives going to waste. What else are they going to do? There's nothing for them to do. Literally, there's no jobs for them. Their lives are ruined for the rest of their lives because the system has dragged their names through the mud. Hasn't gave them the tools needed to fix their own problems. Hasn't gave them the skills required. Hasn't gave them any hope. There's what goal? What goal? What goal do they hope to achieve? With nothing. Starting with nothing. No skills. No work ethic base. No support. Just NDIS workers enabling them to stay where they are. Useless. And getting tougher on crime's going to fix that, is it? No, it's not. It's just going to create more criminals.
We actually sorry to interrupt. I remember seeing that during the campaign between Trump and Joe Biden, because that was the point. Like the Republicans, so they were struggling. Like they didn't know what to say about. Oh, why should you not vote for Biden? But then there was, the demonstrations at the time, and again the activists, the hardcore left wing activists came up with this whole notion of defunding the police. Of course, the right absolutely lashed on that, and they thought, yes, we've got something to talk about. And you remember, they just kept on going on about, they got to defund the police. And I thought to myself, like the point you made in our last discussion, that sometimes the activists, they can be so stupid themselves as well, because they say stupid things like that. That just fuels the right.
I don't want to say stupid, Tim. I don't want to. Look, I have been there. I have been, and you remember, I don't use terms left and right, but I have been, and I'm still an activist. But I have, in earlier years as an activist, I go back, maybe not being pragmatic in terms of where we're going with that. And let me just come back on defund the police. It was the actual policy behind defund the police. There was a really good policy there. And if you look at a place like New York, New Jersey, they've been doing this effectively. They're talking about community policing. And when they mean community policing, what they mean is, rather than the police come in and seen as punishers, you see the police as being part of the community in terms of education, in terms of, encouragement, in terms of working with people to try to prevent crime from happening. And that makes absolute sense. And so the actual policy which was there is, instead of putting so much funds into that punishment side of policing, put more funds into community programs in terms of it. So, and I guess it didn't read as well on a placard, but basically community policing.
Yes.
Just think of that as a slogan that would have gone out there in 2020. But we were in the aftermath of George Floyd getting killed. We were in the middle of Black Lives Matter protests and so on. And people were really agitated, and they were really angry with the police with just cause, because we didn't just have the George Floyd case. There was.
Now, we all know, what was the Black Lives Matter movement? Oh, I'm going to get a new mouse and keyboard, Dave. What was that? Who was that? That was the ragtag remnants built off of the crumbs of what was left of the Black Panther movement. Given a big fat cash injection. Like we all know about the pallets of bricks being left around and stuff. Who paid for that? George Soros. Now, bear with me, doing a bit of housework. Why did they do that? Because they want their zero tolerance digital Digital city bullshit. Thesis, antithesis, synthesis. Don't fuck with my dog, huh? All right. Like I say, there's two sides to every argument, both taken into the same place. They'll defund the police. It was a good thing taken out of context. And how was it taken out of context? By having the wrong people in the job as police. By having the wrong type of ministers for police. The wrong type of commissioners. By having zero tolerance communists claiming that socialists are communists. Propaganda 101. It's you deny it all you like. But when you look at the what started it, what was the argument that ensued in the middle of it all, and what came from it? Thesis, antithesis, synthesis. Well, I like to call zero-sum dialectics. We always end up going backwards.
The James Blaze case in Wisconsin, the man who was, he survived, but he was critically injured in front of his kids when he was shot 7 times. There was the case down in Georgia, and forgive me, I forget the name of the victim, but a guy that was shot to death by the police. And he was like, there were these cases out there. People were really angry and they were really frustrated, and they just let it.
What's that? We're watching it play out again right now in America. And it's going to play out here. It's happening with the bum rush. No, not the bum rush that people remember from the days of old with the Epsom salt speed. I mean, the bum rush. The bums rushing. Rushing the gates, rushing the borders. Storming the house. What do you think Morocco and Spain's all about? Morocco and Spain. Donald Trump's already jumped onto that one. Now, it's funny that Morocco has such a close relationship with the Trump regime, with the Republican Party, and a very close relationship with Israel. Netanyahu and co. It's a little bit too convenient for my comfort. Considering everybody just went home of their own accord at the end of the day, they were obviously promised something that they didn't get. And then we had people running around door to door, pretending to be them, saying, look, they're going into people's houses doing this and that. And we've got footage of people going in and having fights with people that aren't even there around the corner. Gotta love Central Casting. They're great. They're tremendous.
It's you got to understand people aren't necessarily pragmatic when it comes to we're really pissed off with all of this. But you're absolutely right, because what happened, and again, we talk about how you deal with Trump speeches. Get behind Trump. I mean, July the 4th of that year, it was actually on July the 3rd. It was the day before. He was out at Mount Rushmore, where he wants to get his face carved in the mountain. And that speech on July the 3rd, 2020, because I'm just writing the book on him. So I was writing up the episode for it. Because you go back and look at the speech, and what he does is they're in the middle of COVID. They're not going to win on COVID because they've really screwed things up. And I do want to talk about that in just a minute, because we've got a sequel with Dr. Fauci today. They're not going to win with COVID. They're not going to win with the economy, because it's been, it's in the pandemic mounts, which is taking place. There are other issues. Immigration has been pushed to the side because of this. So they're not going to win with that. So what's Trump going to do? And he goes out and that's where he declared culture wars. That's the culture war speech. He actually came out and said, we're being overrun by these extremists, American culture, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, 6 years later, almost to the day, for the 250th, he goes back out to Mount Rushmore. So he's posing again to be the 5th president. And this is where he then says, the communists are taking over America. So it's not subtle what's being done here, is that it was the culture war sticks in 2020, it was the communist stick in 2026. And the real risk here, which takes me back why I called out the co-chair of the DSA for that, is the real risk here is that you have the media and you have pundits and you even have some analysts who fall into that. They fall into Trump's trap. They fall into that terrain. So the 2020 knock-on effect is he didn't win in 2020. And in 2024, he did not win. I don't think he won on culture wars, but he didn't lose on culture wars. And by that, what I meant is he won because of economy and immigration primarily. But if you remember the 24 election, when Kamala finally took over from Biden, when he got out way too late, and they're trying to just save the campaign, they were really doing it on the idea of rights, right? Women's rights, more broadly, gender rights, minority rights. They're doing it on what would have been, throwback 1960s platform, right? For 2026. Their problem here is that, and again, it was interesting to track when this happened. Back in 23, not Trump, but like activists around Trump had already made the decision that there's a...
If you want to understand how things work, especially these days, this game is for you. You're not just playing, you're actually learning how to build simple circuits, understand water pressure, and see how electricity flows. The problem is...
right-wing.
Yeah. This is where I'm going to bring you into the middle. There's a bunch of you going, oh, and rightly so. What are we seeing here? This is how people are controlled up in this opposition and don't even realise they're controlled opposition quite often. People are going to really click on with this, which I do. 98.5%. That 1.5%, that's the tread carefully factor. I said a while ago that what I think is going on is the pendulum of that good that old grandfather clock of control, social control of the Western grandfather clock. The pendulum is being swung that hard and fast, so that it comes back twice as hard and fast, and it gets a knee-jerk reaction. And that knee-jerk reaction will be, oh, geez, we've gone to such an extreme. Everything's going to fucking custard. What do? Albert Pike, 33rd degree Grand Master Mason, declared, and I'm pretty sure it was during the Civil War, when he was liaising. It might have been might even be before that. Might have been the Tea Party War. I remember these words. He coined the phrase, "When the people need a hero, we shall provide them with one." They create such a big conundrum of a Pandora's box and let Pandora out. And the only way to get Pandora back in is by this, what we offer you. So you watch everybody go running back to the Democrats instead of fixing their own problems.
Call themselves a think tank, but they're just an activist attack group. And they made the decision to go after transgender. They made the decision, right? We're going to go after that idea, men and women's sports, all that stuff, right? And then you had a guy named Christopher Rufo, who I think is behind Newsmax, that right-wing attack outlet. But he's been buddies with Trump for a long time. And Rufo, in 23, comes out and says, we're going to go after critical race theory, right? Now, the point here is, look, critical race theory is really, really important. It's a really important concept to understand the law, to understand sociology, to understand psychology, to understand history, political science. I could run you all the way through it. What the Trump folks were successful at doing is poisoning the discussion around rights and responsibilities to talk about how the real problem was woke, DEI, critical race theory, and specifically men playing women's sports and rubbish like that. Now, instead of calling that out, which is what should be called out, I saw too many pundits analysts. And again, one of them is the other leading analyst of U.S. politics here in Ireland. There's really only two of us that run that term. So don't want to single him out. There were others in the U.S., in the U.K., et cetera. They fall into this trap, and they're going, yeah, we've got a serious problem with identity politics in America. We've got a serious problem in that, people really, generally, the transgender issues. It's like, piss off. Transgender rights are human rights. You as an analyst should say that. You should say that from the very start. Then, when you've put it on that footing, you could say, all right, there may be issues about how do we deal with sporting events with the question of transgender athletes, something which sporting organizations have been trying to deal with for years. Yeah. There may be issues about public spaces, something that we've been trying to deal with for years. But do not let Trump pervert the idea of transgender rights or human rights because you fall into his trap. And then we've got analysts who said, yeah, we've got a problem in the universities. We got all these lefties in the universities. And yes, I put the Instagram reel out this week precisely because I'm ticked off about it. Because lefties have not overrun academia. You're still safe, guys. Your boys and girls are still safe.
Yeah, this is where I had to swallow a ton of pride. Transgender rights, the whole transgender rights thing, was the vehicle to carry the erosion of human rights. The rights that you don't stick up for somebody else are rights of your own that you're losing. And if you don't step away from your peg, you won't realise what you've lost because you've never experienced it. You've never lived a free life. Obviously, you've never lived. You're not interested in living. You're literally a waste of oxygen.
And they were coming out and saying, we've got a problem with critical race theory. And I was watching analysts who don't actually know what critical race theory is putting this out there. And so here we are in 2026. And you actually wonder if you're going to have these same analysts and pundits who are going to fall into Trump's trap and say, no, the problem here is that we've got extremism in American society. We've got radicalism. And they're sitting there pointing out at the left. When in fact, let's pull the curtain back behind this. If you want to talk about culture wars in 2020, the biggest threat to American culture was a convicted felon, or he would eventually be a convicted felon, right? Was a guy who would eventually become a convicted felon and a fraudster who had been accused of and was later convicted of serious sexual crimes against women, whose business practices had come under a great deal of scrutiny for being discriminatory, who had used racist language repeatedly throughout his business and political career, and who had allies around him like Stephen Miller, who also used racist language, ethnic language, to threaten to punish people. The war on American culture is coming from those folks, not from the left. And if you want to talk about the worry about extremism and radicalism in 2026, it's not from communists. It is, I would argue, with respect to Christians, my father's a preacher, with respect to Christians, it is with respect to a perverted version of Christian nationalism, which is being pushed by these people, not just for rhetoric, but is implemented as policy. It is from an extremism, which in some cases is authoritarian.
He's spot on. Like I say, it's a statement, not an idol. He's spot on.
That's the real threat.
The anti-Christian
right?
Christians.
But they're not going to come out and say that. They're not going to say we're the threat. They're going to run it on it. And every time I get asked a question, who's going to win the November elections? Who's going to win? And I could say, I could take you through all the states and all of that. So there's that wider question that's always in my head. It's not who's going to win Senate or House. It is where will American culture and politics be during and after this election? Will it be further corroded, or will you?
Here's a question for you. Here's a question for you. Before it became a political issue, what gay people out there was wanting to validate through the church gay marriage? No, now I'm going to piss some people off here. I don't mean to. Oh, no problem. You want to be gay? Fine, go be gay. Be gay and happy and merry. You do you. People are going to people. Marriage as a Christian in the Christian institution, as a faith institution based in faith, is based on procreation and raising your family in the path that they should go, abiding by the laws of Christ. But the government had to get in on that. Why? Well, people changing names, wanted to keep a tab on who those people are. Now they've got different last names, women I'm talking about. They're going to have kids. We need to keep a tab on them kids, and then there's the tax element. I ask you this. If there wasn't certain tax breaks and there wasn't certain pros in getting married financially, which there are, would you still be hopping up and down about we want it validated? We want to be legitimately married in the eyes of the law? Would you even bother with it if the government didn't make it a campaigning issue? Because that referendum we had wasn't a referendum. It's not even close by any means to a lawful referendum here in Australia. That was an opinion poll, a postal opinion poll, because not everybody voted. Oh. So you see, it's mandatory to vote for a party, but it wasn't mandatory to vote in a referendum on marriage. I refused to have anything to do with that. Why? I don't believe in it. Why? Okay, you love each other. Fine. I also look at it from this point of view too. If a woman chooses to be with a woman or a bloke chooses to be with a bloke, there's no way that you can procreate in that situation. You've made your choice to not have children. I'm sorry, but that's... Okay? You're either for procreation or you're not. The whole marriage thing was a load of shit. Now, no, I know people are going to be pissed off with that. That's not my goal in that. My goal in telling you that, you got played.
See someone where you see a pushback that we need this decent culture, this decent politics to take place, and then we'll carry on for the next couple of years trying to fight the good fight, as you get it towards the end of Trump. And I think it will be the end of Trump. But the threat here is, again, to use a line, the other prominent analyst here and I like the guy. He's a nice guy, and he says he's a Democrat, but he repeatedly writes. He says, "Oh yeah, Americans now embrace they now embrace Trumpism without Trump." What? Where do you get that? Where do you get that from? First of all, you need to tell us what Trumpism is if you're going to use a line like that. And it's not economic policy, because Trump doesn't run sensible economic policy. It's not that. Are you saying most Americans support deporting, mass deportation of immigrants? Is that what you're saying? Are you saying that they support destruction of American agencies?
Hey guys. Bye girls. Hey dog. Yeah, just a sec. So, it's just us. Remember.
Are you saying that?
By the way, he's not saying, so you're saying. He's not trying to say that that's what you are saying. He's asking the question, is this what you're saying? Is that what you're saying? Because, clearly those things don't They're not sustainable, and they're inhumane. They're crimes against humanity. Everyone knows where I stand on that. You can't just go and run around blowing up people's countries and then offer them somewhere to live, and then call them illegal immigrants and kick them back out, or leave somebody with absolutely nowhere to go. Where the fucking hell are they going to go? This is what I actually get wound up about it. Where the fucking hell are they going to go? If you don't give them anywhere to go, where else? You're creating the problem on purpose.
They support bypassing the courts because that's what. Are you saying they support January the 6th? 2021. Is that what you mean by Trumpism? That's the first thing. Secondly, it's historically not true. And again, for those of you who are looking at the election and thinking, "Oh, America has just shifted all the way to the right," so it's really an interesting lesson to go back over the past few elections and think about it. 2016, Clinton ran a terrible campaign. The Russians were involved, and Trump ran the snake oil pitch. 2018, the Democrats pushed back. That was that huge influx, especially of women who went into Congress in the first time, the women in white, right? And you talk about people like AOC who entered Congress 2018. 2020, that's the COVID election. You know who won the presidency there. 2022 is really interesting. The Republicans thought they were going to sweep in 2022 coming through. The Democrats actually held on to most of the seats they were expected to lose, and Trump was blamed for it. This is really, really interesting. If you look, people at the start of 2021, the American media thought Trump was finished. They got that one wrong, but I know why. That's fine. But a lot of Republicans turned against Trump in late 22, early 23, and said he's ruining our party. He's ruining it. And as late as the end of 2023, you got a lot of Republicans who are saying this guy's using language that's authoritarian, and even some Republicans, not Democrats, who are saying this guy's using fascist language. That's late 23. The reason why things turned in 24 is, first of all, Ron DeSantis was an absolute joke of a candidate. He was the one that all the Republicans were flocking to because they didn't want Trump. And then he proved basically to be like the world's worst stick puppet who went on an overseas tour, and he came back that he was bored and looked at his shoes most of the time. That's not the way you should run as a candidate. And Trump got under his skin. And that started to turn the election in 24. And then the other thing that is interesting in 24, is he played the victim because of the legal cases. And he got away with that. And then, of course, who did the Democrats run in 24? Yep, Joe. And we know that, and you know where the story goes from there. Why do I tell you that story? Because I'm going to push back against the narratives you will have from now through 28, which is, America is moved right wing. It's Trumpism without Trump. America now supports like hardline policies on immigration, right? The Democrats have lost the working class. They've lost the Hispanics and all of that. Mm-hmm. America, it's more fluid than that. If you were actually to track, it's more fluid the way that people move. They don't tend to go into ideological camps for sustained periods of time in terms of lots of Americans. So a quick question to you. What is the longest period of time that a single party has held the presidency since 1945? 12 years.
The Republicans.
Yeah, it was Republicans. So it was Reagan and Big Bush held it for 12. But apart from that, they either hold 4 or 8 years, and Americans tend to swing back and tack back against to where they are. And a lot of the media justifiably, or, and I'm talking about sensible media here, not the whack job media. A lot of sensible media here are worried that Trump may have broken that as well, that he may have broken the system where people are now betting in with him for the long haul. For reasons I can get, I've been outlining, I don't think that's necessarily the case. But I think most importantly from this long rant, and I apologize, is just to come back to what the issues are. Because just to give you another example, the big issue in the 2018 midterms, you want to take a guess? It was healthcare. In 2018, it was healthcare, right?
Oh, yeah, 2000, it was health. Sorry,
why was it helping?
I had COVID in my head. I'm like, it's like, I'm sorry.
Well, it's linked. It's linked. If you just look at the healthcare system, you're not going to be in good shape. Yeah. But if you think about it, in 2018, because what Trump did have certain policies. And one of the policies that the Trump folks ran on is they wanted to gut Obamacare. And they eroded it. But they didn't gut it because of John McCain, right? Well, Americans knew that. And what's interesting is they voted back. They pushed back against that. When you get a tangible issue, that's when Americans tend to react. And I've got to say that for all the noise of the 24 election, and I hate the way that it ultimately came out, and I hate the way that the issues were not covered properly by the media, but in the end, Trump wins because Americans feel they're not economically better off. And they feel that America's got a serious immigration problem. So you get to 26, and for all this noise he's making about communists, what do Americans feel about the economy? What do they feel about immigration? What do they feel about healthcare? And what do they feel about that war in Iran?
Mm-hmm. But this has to still be linked to the media in general. I mean, because going back to the point I made at the beginning, is that it's all the breaking news, the clickbaits, etc. Oh, look, Trump said this, Trump said that, etc. And the thing is, again, fine, they want to report whatever nonsense he says. But in fact, what enticed me to start this podcast, for example, right, and build Retort Media, is that there's barely any pushback from the media. So everything that you've highlighted, for example, about his rally recently, I haven't seen many media outlets calling out, say, well, actually, no, these figures are wrong. I mean, very few. I mean, I've seen a few clips. But that should be all over the news, surely. They should say, actually, ladies and gentlemen, my dear American citizens, your president is lying to you. I mean, he can't sue them for saying this, but it's because it's true. The guy literally was just talking utter nonsense. And I'm thinking to myself, that the media did not do that.
They've got a problem. And again, and I'm sorry that this intersects just because of the current work that I'm doing. And I'm saying, so I'm actually... I'm at the point in the book where I'm writing up the 24 election, right? And there was a really good article in the middle. It says, first of all,
I'm trying not to stop it too much because it's quite long. It goes for over an hour as it is. I'm trying to keep it under 2. Now, a lot of people they even, like with myself, think that, Dave just wants his hairy-fairy and he just wants to destroy everything and turn it all to custard. And I hate police and we shouldn't have police. And I hate government, we shouldn't have government. No. It's not the case at all. Not the case at all. I don't trust the system that we have. And I don't trust the people in charge of that system because they're using it in the wrong way. Right? Anyone that works with that system and wants to support that system is corrupt because the system itself is corrupt. So like he said, I'm not for no prison, no police. I'm for a completely different model of it. One that actually works for the people. One that is based on, like you said, community policing. How about we start lifting people up instead of stomping all over them? How about we have a governing system that says to the people, okay, how can we best serve you guys in order for us all to prosper, instead of just us and we tax the living shit out of you and keep whacking you over the head with legislation after legislation after legislation and calling that law, because it ain't fucking law. It's not even close. Law serves the benefit of everybody. Legislation serves the few, and we ain't the few.
You have to realize is that Trump creates an imbalance in what happens with the media, and that is
We're old stuff. Whatever. That was pretty groovy. Catchy in there, I like pussy. Take the money.
in this case they were talking about Biden, then eventually it'll become Harris. But the terms in which you approach Biden and Harris is that you will approach them in terms of what are their policies, how successful have they been with their policies, because that's what's taken out. You can't do that with Trump, right? There's not because Trump doesn't have policies that you can engage with in terms of. Now you can say he doesn't have policies, right? I think you could make the case that the media could forthrightly say he just does not have policies.
And there are consequences of that as well for not having policies. And there are economic consequences.
Not having policy. Consequences which take place. But what happens with Trump when you talk about him in terms of a campaigner is therefore, because the media can't really engage with him in policies, they turn to engage with him in terms of his rhetoric. That's where they engage with him on. And you and I have been talking primarily about Trump's rhetoric, culture wars, communism. Now, when you get to a serious crisis around an issue, which happened in 2020 and COVID, Trump can't pull off that trick because he's in office at that point. He's in office and COVID is there. And so any journalist is going to say, what are you doing about COVID? Right? What are you doing? And ultimately, it was a close election. Remember, it wasn't like Biden won it in a landslide.
Exactly.
But ultimately, I think COVID does for Trump in that. So now in 24, when he's in opposition, what is interesting is that the media really don't hold him to account and say, okay, what is your economic policy going to be to deal with the post-pandemic situation? Nor does the media say to Trump, inflation is down to 3%. It was 9%, right? That's pretty successful, right? They don't come back to Trump and say, at least from what I'm saying, is they don't come back and say, what's your policy going to be, in terms of immigration? They may say, they'll repeat his rhetoric about mass deportations and the fact that he calls folks animals and so on. But for example, it was really interesting. This is such an interesting case. And again, it's where issues get back. The 24 election, if you look at what happened at the start of that year, the Democrats tried to pass one of the most comprehensive border security acts that has ever been passed in U.S. history. Right? And it had bipartisan support. So we're talking about there was border security in there, but there was also, we were going to have to deal with how we handled the asylum cases, right? So you have to handle, in terms of the courts that handle asylum cases, we were going to have to, they were trying to talk about economic policies as well around that, not just for the U.S., but for the region. So they had this comprehensive immigration package. And the Republicans were on board. And then Trump put the order out, don't vote for it. And that killed it. Almost stone dead immediately. Now, did the media come back in the autumn of 24 and say the reason why we don't have this border security policy is not because of the Biden administration, it's because of the Trump folks? And they didn't. And that's the problem, is that the media would have to do two things to have done that. One is they have to go beyond Trump's rhetoric to go to an analysis and hope they hold people with it, right? And two, they're always worried they don't look balanced, right? Now, you cannot tell that story of the border security and Trump sabotaging border security in a balanced way, because there's no balance here. The Democrats put the policy forward, Trump folks sabotaged. You can't either or what happened. And the Trump folks did not put an alternative policy up. So that's where the gap occurs that Trump exploits. Now, here we are in 26. It's going to be harder for Trump to get away with this in 26 because he's in power, right? But my worry here is, in the run-up of the next couple of months, is they'll still engage with his rhetoric instead of going back to, which is, all right, in the course of what will be by November, almost 2 years in office, what have you done on immigration, right? Now, the Trump folks will say, we've reduced the number of crossings across the border, blah, 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 right? And then will the media come back and say, how many are in detention? How many have been disappeared? How many people have been killed by your policies that have taken place? And that includes American citizens, by the way, as well as immigrants. When it comes to the economy, it was there. Trump, again, in Michigan, greatest economy ever, greatest economy jobs. And I'm going, dude, I just sat here and it was there. It was only reported on for a few hours, right? I just looked at the June jobs report. You were supposed to, economists were predicting 120,000 jobs were going to be added in June, and it was 56,000. not very strong in terms of growth. Now, are the media going to stick on that? Or as you pointed out, oh, we've got breaking news, we've got to jump cycle. Yeah. One of the reasons why I do what I do, and I don't know if people like it or not, one of the reasons why you do what you do, though, whether or not people stick with it, but why I think we do it is you've got to go beyond the headline. You've got to have a society which can go beyond the headline and function, because any good business doesn't work on a day-to-day cycle when they do their business planning. They function on 3-year, 5-year, 10-year plans. The same thing with analysis is that you don't just do what the headline is. You go back in terms of what has happened to get us to this point, and then you look forward as well. And we'll say, but it is interesting that I think it can be done, and I think there are outlets that do it. But I think the big thing about mainstream media, while they tried to adopt some of the new platforms, so they're there on YouTube now, they're there on Insta, some of them even ventured to TikTok, I think they're stuck in the old way of the way that you cover these stories. I just think they don't. And the point, and by that what I mean is they still do deep dive analysis. And you'll see the New York Times devoting all kinds of resources. Yeah. The type of analysis that I'm talking about is can you explain to an audience in 2 minutes the analytic significance of an event, right? And in fact, I'm going to ask our viewers when we post this, have the viewers come in and say, here's an issue we would like you to analyze in 2 minutes. And can you do it? Because we know that whatever we say here, a lot of media operates on people got you got 2 minutes. Yeah. Go. Can you do that? And I'll give you a test case now because I've rambled on for so long. I was going to take us to the top of the hour, but we'll go a bit. Let me give you my 2-minute story for right now, if you would like it for today. I'd like to talk about Dr. Anthony Fauci, right? Let's go for it. Folks, if you do not see this story tomorrow, if you just see the headline, I'm going to ask you to establish the significance of what is happening in Washington, D.C. today. You can put a clock on me now. Dr. Anthony Fauci, who was America's leading virologist during COVID in 2020, he was a key advisor to the Trump administration, despite the fact that the administration often didn't listen to him, is being questioned in a Senate hearing today. But he's not being questioned. He's being persecuted in that hearing. It is being called by a man named Rand Paul, who's a libertarian, who has his own pet idea that COVID started in a lab in Wuhan, China, and that Anthony Fauci covered this up, and that Anthony Fauci is complicit in protecting the Chinese, and therefore, Rand Paul's words, not mine, Anthony Fauci should be in prison. Anthony Fauci, because of the threat of prison in this hearing, is taking the Fifth Amendment repeatedly, as he should, because he does not want to make a statement that will be used to try to imprison him. Mm. I want you to think about how we got to this point. That the man who was responsible for protecting lives, and he saved a hell of a lot of lives in 2020, along with a lot of other great people, a lot of other great scientists, a lot of great medical workers that were out there, they saved lives. America still lost more than 700,000 people to COVID. The primary reason why they lost so many people did not have to do with Anthony Fauci. It had to do with political leadership, who had gutted preparations for a pandemic before they took office, who did not make adequate preparations when the virus started to spread, and who then told Americans to defy containment measures, to not even observe the measures that would save their lives. Because Anthony Fauci called them out on that, including, for example, Donald Trump advising people to drink bleach, or just bleach, he becomes persecuted. And he gets called an idiot, he gets called incompetent, and then he gets called a criminal by that very administration. And here we are 6 years later. So what America should be doing is thanking Anthony Fauci for his service, which, by the way, existed for decades before COVID, instead of persecuting himself. So think to yourself, how did we get such a perversion of politics? Largely because of Trumpists, that you're going to do this. And now I'm going to over 2 minutes because I'm going to tell you they're big stinger on this and so on. Go back and watch the 1953 version of War of the Worlds. The film version, not the book, because it's not in the book. Have you seen that?
I've seen it.
In the middle of War on the Worlds. In the middle of War on the Worlds, people get so frightened, they get so scared, and they get so manipulated. They go and they smash up the equipment of the scientists who are trying to deal with the aliens that are threatening to wipe them out. The only reason why they avoid getting wiped out, because they have basically gotten rid of science, is because God intervenes. You know what? 2026, you can't trust God's going to intervene on this one, folks. So if you trash your scientists, trash your researchers, because you've got a snake oil salesman in the White House who told you to do it, God help you, or maybe not help you. There you go. Now, we'll see if that sticks as an analysis of what's happening today. But the supplemental to that, which tells you why you make it so difficult.
He actually makes a good point there. Regardless of your politics on COVID, absolutely regardless on your politics on COVID, he makes a really good point there. Because we all know what I believe on COVID. What I believe and what I know aren't the same, are they? Because I believe nothing of what I hear and analyse everything that I see. And then I like it verified from two unrelated separate sources. And then maybe we can call it intel. I tested positive for COVID. I was cooked, but it was nothing like tonsillitis or anything. I got over it pretty dang quick. So within a couple of days, I'm like, oh God, I was stuck in my room. Yeah. The only reason I was stuck in my room is because ex-missus wouldn't let me out. Nobody else in the house got it. It was a flu. It was just a flu. We've got the bloke that invented the PRC testing system, which, by the way, is the same as your lick tests, which, by the way, is the same as the one they do at the police station that you submit to. They throw false positives and negatives all the time. So the testing was unreliable. The point he's making there, which is a very interesting point, and I actually agree with, what happens when it is real and nobody believes it? What happens when it is something serious and nobody believes it? See, now we've got the boy who cried wolf scenario, don't we? We don't know what to believe anymore. We're cynical. So we're at that believe nothing scenario, this is why I say it's got to go. The whole system's got to go. But it doesn't mean that we have nothing. Yes, we do need a police service. Yes, we do need some kind of correctional system. A correctional system, which is a service to everybody. Not just a revenue racket like we've got now, and a punishment machine. That's all we have. It's abhorrent. What we've got now, it's abhorrent. It's horrible. It's inhumane. It treats people like animals. Like a dog with parvo at the pound or something. It's disgusting. So, this is a big problem that we have. And nobody's addressing this conversation, and it's one that needs to be had. Somebody needs to pull out, look what's going on in our own parliament. Now they're still hopping up and down. We need a Royal Commission into that. We need an inquiry, a political inquiry, a full analysis and an inquiry into the COVID and into the PRC testing and into the vaccines and blah, blah, blah. And, well, how about we just piss a lot of yous off? And then we let some people that we can trust in charge of all that, because none of us can be trusted, because none of us even want to address the Woodrow Commission. You don't want to actually get to the bottom of Ashley's detention centre child molestation. and pedophiles. We don't want to discuss the Epstein files at all. It's like, fucking what happened to the Epstein files? There's people, somebody was saying that a bunch of people at the soccer game in America, Australians, were chanting something about Donald Trump being a pedophile or something. And he was all proud of us Australians, but it's actually not happening. You're being told on social media these things are happening. Okay. Do you see it anywhere? People are still sticking up for all these politicians. And we do not know who we can and can't trust. And if nobody's actually blowing the whistle, then we can't trust any of them. We have to be cynical when it comes to the politicians. They've all been in the game for that long, and none of them are blowing the whistle. They need to all go. We need a proper constitution that we decide on. We need a proper law system that we decide on, a service. And we need to let actual people who can handle money be in charge of the economy. And as far as I'm concerned, we don't owe a damn cent to anyone in the world. We didn't create the debt. It's not our debt. We need to liquidate all these politicians' portfolios and assets. I'm quite sure between a lot of them we can find a bit over $1 trillion. Oh, and by the way, also I think that Gina Reinhardt needs to be pissed off out of that mine. And we need to start thinking a little bit more. Okay, let's go again on the whole economic structure of things and sustainability. Okay, why should a bunch of people live in squalor while other people live it on up and party down like Charlie Sheen and never earn any of it? Nobody asks to be born poor. Nobody asks to be born rich. It just happens. Nobody asks to be born here or there or somewhere else. That's just the way it is. Greed and capitalism creates people who want to be as gods. That's Babel. That's Mesopotamia. That's the first, and the second, and the third fall of man. Every time. Forbidden knowledge brings us undone every time. It's not for us to know. So the wrong people are in charge. Until we put God back in charge, we're just going to keep going like this, aren't we? Well, but we're in the end times, and well, fucking so what? If that's the case, I'm quite sure you're not going to feel much. Like I say too, also, well, we're going to outbreed us. I don't think it's going to hurt you. I don't think you'll feel any pain. I don't think you'll suffer. You'll just live out your life and you'll die like we all do. Well, I don't know what you're worried about. Is it going to hurt? Is it going to give you a long and agonising death? Huh? Oh, you're worried that your daughter might marry somebody of a different colour. We're all shades of brown, idiot. Oh, but there's religion and that religion, and they're all based on the same God with the same rules. It's just God then, isn't it? See how stupid your arguments are?
Is that to this day we don't know where the lab originated from. It's just not conclusive. And this is the other thing we need to highlight in 2026. And the backdrop of it is that one of the working theories, which is the one that most virologists still subscribe to as a theory, we haven't got close, is that it started in the wet markets of Wuhan, that it jumped species, right? And other viruses have done that. I think SARS actually jumped. Now, there's another theory that there is a lab of virology and immunology in Wuhan. And as most labs of virology and immunology have, they probably keep samples of bad things, right? And that one of these escaped. And that's what led to COVID. Now, what Rand Paul and a lot of the other Trumpists say is, it's conclusive. It all came up. It's not. In fact, the CIA assesses with low confidence that the virus could have come from that lab. But nobody, at least as far as I know, who genuinely is pursuing and pushing this lab theory has actually asked what with low confidence means. With low confidence in the intelligence community means it's uncorroborated claims. It's not solid evidence. When you have a conclusion that you have low confidence, you have medium confidence, you have high confidence. If you have high or even medium confidence, you've got evidence. Low confidence is not. It's claims. But that's where this all has started from. But because we can't conclusively establish where this virus comes from, it opens up that space of uncertainty. And that's the one that gets exploited. Again, it's media's job to highlight, this is uncertain. This is uncertain. We don't know. We need to act accordingly. Okay. We'll see if that works.
And they're using, and as you said, like basically they're using it as an excuse to go after him purely because he called out Trump, because he basically challenged him.
Yeah, I mean, there's an add-on to it that his diary, they got a hold of his diaries. And in his diaries, he comes out and he talks about Trump being like an adolescent, as being basically, effectively not stable, temperamental, angry, all of which is true. And so they've gotten onto that. But again, at the time, I mean, just to give you the quick narrative, why it's important. So, COVID kicks off in around January of 2020 in the US. It did. First signs of it from late November, December in China. And of course it crosses, there's the infamous cruise ship incident where it comes into the West Coast. And it spreads pretty rapidly. That's why it was such a dangerous damn, and the other thing to remember about corona, it was a novel coronavirus. It was a new coronavirus, right? So scientists didn't have all the data to establish what are we exactly dealing with here. But what you got to is that around the end of February, one of the senior people in the Center for Diseases Control who are trying to deal with this, she gives a presser where she says, look, I would think twice now about taking my kids to school, right? Because because we're not sure about the transmission of it and so on. She got absolutely pilloried. And the Trump folks decided at that point they would no longer have the scientists lead the press conferences. And remember, that was very different from the UK. The UK actually had scientific personnel that led their pressers. Chris Whitty was one of them.
Although Boris Johnson didn't always listen, though.
No, he didn't always listen. So, I mean, it's not perfect. But at least they still had the scientists up front. Here, what you had is that Mike, they say, okay, the scientists aren't going to lead the task force now. Mike Pence will lead.
Now, this is where it falls over for me. Event 201, which happened before COVID, which was what happens if we have a novel coronavirus that becomes a pandemic, which happened earlier that year. Yeah, sorry, I don't do coincidences. And it all played out exactly the same, didn't it? So I don't swallow that. But the reason I kept going on with that is he does make a good point. But he makes it from a different angle. I'm making it from the point of we are so cynical now and untrusting that what happens when the real one comes along? Which the next one very well could be. This whole bird flu thing. What if that's real? You see what I'm saying? Here I am. How do I make an informed decision now for myself and my kids when we're fed lies from both directions? How? Is doing something the right thing or the wrong thing? do I take the vaccination or do I run the gauntlet? What happens if they make it mandatory to the point of like, well, you don't get to keep your housing department house because what we're going to do is you're not going to get any payments, which means your rent won't get paid. You won't be able to feed your kids, and you won't get to keep your house unless you take the arm ticket. Now, what do we do in the world with no private ownership when that comes along, which is coming? You see where I'm coming from with this? Which means what? You idiots, I'm like, just let the adults fucking fix all the problems. What, in the government? Okay, but they can't be trusted. Even if they are trustworthy, we can't trust them. I miss my teeth. Look after your teeth, kid. I have an issue with fluoride. But I could use baking soda, couldn't I?
Who has no scientific expertise as far as I know. And then, of course, very quickly, Trump took over press conferences and started running them. Now, what Fauci was trying to do with Trump is he was trying to explain to him in March and April, look, this is really, really serious. This is, you've got to talk about masks. You talk about containment. We just don't know how far this is spreading. And he said at one point he had like a 20-minute conversation trying to convince Trump of that. And he realized at the end of the 20 minutes that Trump just went away after that 20-minute conversation and just went out and did a presser and said the same things that he kept saying. Mm-hmm. And so what you got is Fauci has got this frustration because he knows he and Deborah Birx, who leads it, they know how many people are likely to die. And we had the projections pretty quickly. We're going to talk about hundreds of thousands who are going to die. And by the way, by introducing containment measures, by delaying containment measures by only 1 week in March of 2020, cost the lives of 37,000 people by delaying it 1 week, right? And that's on Trump. And that's on Trump. And I can tell you other stories about the fact that they had not even planned to get protective equipment in for the medical staff. They had not planned to get in ventilators. When they tried to plan this, who did they put in charge of the effort to get protective equipment, ventilators? Jared Kushner. Donald Trump's son-in-law, right? Who did Jared Kushner go to organize this effort? Did he go to like established government people and so on to do this? No, he went to his college buddies. I swear to God, and it's like
what we had in the UK with the VIP lane. It's like basically they went all of their friends and stuff rather than actually.
America never had a proper investigation into the way that COVID was handled. The UK did have an investigation, flawed, but they did have one. We never had it in the US, right? So Trump gets away with this stuff towards that. The election, in a way, was the referendum on it. Because we never had that proper investigation to establish the facts, as opposed to this is why we get this joke that's happening today. Because the Republicans, and Rand Paul's still a Republican, he's libertarian, they aren't going to blame Trump. They're not going to blame Kushner. You're not going to blame those folks. And what you're going to do is you blame the experts. You blame the folks that do. So, kudos to the filmmakers of War of the Worlds, because that scene was not in the novel by Wells, right? But think about it. Think about it again as we loop back around and everything we talked about. Because we talked about the Red Scare earlier. In 1953, when that film comes out, the U.S. is in the midst of the Red Scare. What does Joseph McCarthy say? It's not just that Joe McCarthy and others like him say that communists have infiltrated. They're everywhere. What he's saying here is they've infiltrated every institution. So can't watch your films anymore. Can't trust your films, right? But he's also saying they've infiltrated U.S. agencies. You can't trust the State Department anymore because they're communists in the State Department. You can't trust the CIA because they're in your intelligence agencies. You can't trust the military because they're in the military. You can't trust the universities. You can't trust the legal system. What they're doing is they're undermining the entire U.S. system by saying you can't trust the experts. You can't, because they could be communist. 2026, as you get this new version of the Red Scare, you also have an administration and those that are around them. You can't trust the experts. because they know that if you trust the experts, which you should do, they would have to be held to account for what they've done.
Yeah, that's why people, ladies and gentlemen, listeners, viewers, you need to listen to the experts. I mean, we had the same thing again here with the UK, with Michael Gove, infamously said, "Oh, we've had enough of experts. Listen to us, not experts about Brexit." And I think, that's why my hope, and I know I say this repeatedly, right? But again, it's a reminder. I think because when people see the consequences of what we have right now, I mean, I tell people that where we are today in the world, that's a choice that we made. That's not an inevitability, because I'm seeing some narratives now, especially in the world of tech. Oh, what we're seeing right now was inevitable. Oh, no, it was not inevitable. We made that choice because these people, of course, lied, and the media failed to scrutinize it properly. And some media outlets actually, they were part of that lie as well. They pushed the lies, and we are where we are because we chose to be where we are. I say we, those who chose. I mean, definitely not me, not you, right? But at least, as collectively, as human species, we chose to be where we are. You voted for Trump, you've got the Iran war. You can't say the Iran war was inevitable, right? I mean, that's an example.
No, you can't say it's inevitable. Or to put it on your patch where you're the expert, where you talk about AI, right? Now we've got various issues in terms of how AI is rolled out. You're far smarter than me on that and all that. But at the end of the day, you have people who are making choices about the development and implementation of AI, right? Mm-hmm. So you go back to, who are these people? What do they envisage in terms of putting out AI? And you make choices in terms of whether or not you hold these people to account, right? Or whether you simply say, no, they're beyond accountability. So there's a guy named Elon Musk, who you might have heard of, right? Now, and I know you're having fun with SpaceX, but let's talk about the more seriously. The guy is probably the richest person on the planet, first trillionaire. And here he is, and he gives an interview a few days ago with the editor-in-chief of The Economist. And full credit, we've been having a real pop at the media, right, in terms of what's been, but full credit to the editor-in-chief of The Economist here for asking some tough questions to Elon Musk, right? And one of the things she comes on to Musk about is that you're trying to, effectively, are you trying to incite violence? Are you trying to incite it? And Musk gets really upset about this. That he's getting hauled out for it. Oh, no, I've never done that. I've never called for white supremacy. And she's feeding back his lines to it. Well, no, I'm sorry, you have. And let's be honest here. Elon Musk is trying to foment civil war he's not trying to foment it in the U.S. right now because Trump's in charge. But he's trying to foment civil war in the UK. And in Europe. Yeah, he's quite clearly he's trying to do that. So Musk,
and Australia,
the sequel to this is Musk doesn't come off looking good in the interview. He doesn't look good, and he spent the entire week trying to trash this woman on social media and trying to get all his millions of followers to pile onto her. Right. So
people would say, Cubano, who benefits? Follow the money. But they got all this money. Yeah. But all the money in the world can't buy all the resources if, they can't get to them all. What happens if if the entire West goes into civil war? Lockdown. A full-on, hard, military, martial law lockdown. Why do you think they're trying to send everybody home everywhere? And then bam, force a lockdown on the whole world. No flights. No, you can fly out of a country, but you can't fly into one. There's no point taking off then, is there? Because that's how that'll be treated. You can fly out of a country, you just can't fly into one. If there's nowhere to land, what's the point in taking off? So everyone's in lockdown. And then what happens? We send in the people to run the mines and the minerals and resources. When does the lockdown lift? When the war over there ends. We start to get into 1984 territory then, don't we? When the war over here ends, when the war over there ends. They're still warring in the other state. How will we know otherwise if we can't even cross the border into another state? If we can't get any word out, they say that we're going to have full-on internet blackout, like, bonk, gone. No access to the internet for the people anymore. So you'll just be fed 24/7 propaganda. It's part of Project 2025, people. Just like this is. You all thought I was jumping on their side, didn't you? I agree with a lot of what they're saying. I really do. The problem is, it's designed that way. You can't disagree with what he's saying in a lot of things. I agree. I'm on board with heaps of that. But the problem is that the wrong people are going to be in charge. The wrong people are going to be in control. Now, how can you understand what all this warring's all about? The only people standing in the way are the people that they're destroying. And if we get into a world lockdown based on, civil war right across the West, which is only 12% of the world's population, by the way, so it's not actually that hard to conceive what we perceive. We perceive these things are happening, and you can easily conceptualise that will be easily perceived. You can envision it coming, surely. It doesn't take algebra and trigonometrics to figure that out, nor does it take string theory. You just have to be able to recognise a pattern when you see it. Why do they want to do it? Gee, I don't know. Perhaps they want to leave us behind while they go to Mars. Or send us to another planet to mine it. Who knows? Who knows? The sociopathic nutcases are in control.
Ask yourself, not just simply what type of AI Musk is in charge of, but ask yourself, what does it mean when it is this individual? Because if there's an individual who is fomenting civil war, or at least endorsing civil war, he's going to be willing to use AI to carry that out. Mm-hmm. So my point with Peter Thiel is not with, and we got questions about the various companies or projects Thiel's run. We could talk about it. But my point with Peter Thiel is, what type of society is Peter Thiel pursuing? And he is pursuing an anti-democratic society.
Yes.
His words, not mine.
Yeah, he said it.
Do you really want to invest your futures in a guy like that in terms of where AI is going? And, and if you say yes, okay, good on you and so on. But if you say no, you then have to say, what steps do you have to deal with that person and with the AI that person?
Now you also have to ask yourself, the baby-faced 90-year-old, Larry Ellison, what about Larry? Where's he fit in all this? Where does the whole idea of the first super data centre that's 9 levels deep being built in China, where does that all fit into it? Communist China. Think about that. The second one being built in Jerusalem. And what are they putting under the White House ballroom? Exactly the same thing. Who knows what the hell's been going on for the last 20, 30 years at Pine Gap? We're not allowed to know. And it's in our country, but it's not. You know why? Because it's in a territory. Territory is under completely different rule. They have a king's representative. We don't. The Australian government and Darwin are both completely different from the rest of Australia. They're territories, not states. There's no statesmanship in a territory.
It's responsible. And that then brings us into the area of regulation. That brings us into the area of that you cannot leave something like AI up just to individuals, because as the founders of the United States knew when they set up the entire United States systems, individuals are flawed.
Yeah.
And putting your faith in any individual will lead to serious problems for the system. So you have to put in regulation, you have to put up safeguards, you have to put in checks and balances.
Absolutely. But the one thing we have to warn, maybe sort of as an ending, And I kind of warned about this in I think the prediction, one of my prediction episodes in December 2025, where I said that 2026 would be the year of retaliation, like the year of reckoning, where people will start basically, noticing and they start attacking. Hopefully not in a violent way, but we're already seeing, for example, what's happening with data centers in the US and so on. And not that I'm condoning that, but the point is, people now, we are reaching a boiling point. But the point that I'm making is that not to expect that these guys, the Peter Thiels and the Musk of this world, just to lay down, they will fight back. And the thing that, although this is, I saw just one report. I mean, Drop Site, which is an independent medium, they reported something that is so disturbing. Because for those who remember, but before, was it the Venezuela? Well, yeah, it was before the Venezuela attack or kidnapping, whatever we want to call it. Basically, the Trump administration were targeting boats, right? They turned out to be fisher boats, or well, nobody actually knows, but they say that these boats were smuggling drugs, yada yada. Well, the prosecutor that was investigating this, the potential, the fact that there was a the Trump administration knowingly attacked these boats, that knowing that they're not actually drug cartels or part of the drug cartels, etc. And of course, she wanted to go after the Ecuadorian president, etc. She's been assassinated now, and of course, there's again the mainstream media have not talked about this, because I searched. I was like, okay, has anybody looking into this? Because effectively, from the reporting, again, I don't know that. I haven't seen anything myself. But she seems to have got evidence, or she found evidence suggesting that, or rather implicating Trump and Hexeth into this, basically a war crime, if you think about it, right? So what did they do? Well, they assassinated. And I'm thinking to myself, bloody hell. So these guys are fighting back, right? I guess just as one example.
Yeah. Well, I guess it brings sort of everything we talked together in terms of effectively staying woke, folks, but also saying, do we have a system? Which will do. Far from it being inevitable that Trump would come back and win that second term, and far from the media completely kowtowing to him, if you go back from around about October, November of 23 into early 24, there's a running narrative across the media, which is that Trump is dangerous, that Trump is, some folks will even use the word fascism, some folks will even use the word dictator. Because what Trump had said, just to build upon what you just outlined, he said that he would seek retribution against his enemies. He said that openly at the end of 23. And he was also then saying, this is the infamous interview with Sean Hannity in the town hall, where Hannity's trying to clear this up, say, oh, no, you're not going to be an authoritarian. What he goes, because Hannity's saying, well, you're not going to act like a dictator, are you? And Trump says, well, only on day one. Only on day one. And then he says, drill, baby, drill, and something else, I think, probably something about immigration. You're going to deal with all the immigrants. But, there he said, I'll act like a dictator on day one. And then he starts using language, which he starts talking about immigrants poisoning the blood of America.
Yes.
Now, anybody who studies your history from the 1930s, and in particular actually looks at Mein Kampf, remember that book by a fellow named Adolf Hitler, talks about folks who poison the blood of the Aryan society. And Trump then gets to the point where he calls immigrants, refugees, asylum seekers, he calls them vermin. Again, if you go back and look at your history of Germany in the 30s, you'll see that. And he then says immigrants are animals, they're not human beings.
Again. I need to get back to my fairy tale books, do I? My fantasy books. No, they're not actually fantasy books. It's history. And Adolf's last name was actually Heidler, with the D. Heidler. Heidler. We're hearing that rhetoric here in Australia, aren't we? Oh, they're going to outbreed us. They're going to breed us into nothing. I say, is it going to hurt? Is it going to hurt you? What? What's your problem? Seriously. You'll be dead. Who cares? Who cares if the next generation's happy? I care if they're not. If they are, great. If they're content, they have a good life, and they're not weak jellybacks like us, and they learn from the mistakes that we're making right in front of them, all the better. Are we all God's children? It's fucking crazy.
And the media is like, whoa, God, this breaks all the norms for Trump from 2016. And you get a whole series of Republicans who then say, look, this guy's just toxic, right? And you get...
Again, and we come back to where he's tried to fob that off. It's the pendulum thing, the left and right. Swing that pendulum as hard as you can so it swings back. It's the swing back that they're counting on. Geez, that went a long way that way. Right, comes right past them. Look how extreme they are. No, that's just a pendulum that you swung back. Fighting with each other, angry, vitriol, swinging that pendulum back and forward. Nobody's actually meeting in the middle going, we're just living rent-free in each other's heads. What is it at the end of the day that you want? Home, your family to be happy and comfortable, to be able to live in peace with your neighbours. We actually want the same thing. With good food on the table. We all actually want the same thing. So what the fuck are we doing? Being played for idiots. This is just another pendulum swing. The big fat lie floating on an ocean of half-truths. I've spoken about these heaps of times. You can float the biggest, fattest lie on an ocean of half-truths, on a sea of things that you agree with. It's just, they just keep finding different faces to tell the same story. Oh, somebody else agrees. Okay. It's one club and you ain't in it. Well, people will save her money. Apparently he's a doctor. Do you know that? Who knows he's a doctor? Who's his patients?
Or his former officials. His chief of staff, John Kelly, comes out and says, this guy's a dictator. This guy, and Kelly actually says it. And there's that window where the media is like, okay, these are the guys' world. You're holding this. You are making this accountable. But as I said, the problem is that the media runs in cycles. And once the cycle turns to Trump winning the nomination, the Republican nomination, so there's no alternative to him. And once the legal cases take over the narrative, and then when Biden takes over the narrative by, is he too old? Is he, is he mentally capable? Up until the freeze of the debate in June, Trump doesn't have to play on that turf anymore. So that's the way that it operates. And it's really important to say that you don't forget a story. You don't forget that Trump said those things. You don't forget that it happened as we here are in 2026, because what we know is that Trump, who lies a lot, who is deceptive, who doesn't really have a grasp of facts, but we know that he actually stated a fundamental truth in 23. He wanted retribution. That was his primary goal. And once he said he wanted retribution, the Capitol attack, the folks who attacked the Capitol became hostages. They became political prisoners. The people who prosecuted them were the evil people. The FBI for investigating it, then the judiciary. So those were your enemies that take place. That the people who filed the legal cases against him, they weren't doing their jobs according to Trump. They were the enemy. You have to destroy the judiciary. You have to destroy the district attorney. You have to destroy that. And you have to destroy the agencies. So this is happening the way he said he was going to do it, supported by Project 2025. And that is a case of like, whichever way, wherever we go in the next weeks, the next few months, whatever, you hold on to that takes place. Because I would say right now that if you're looking forward, and I am not really looking past November 2026, but if you're looking forward in terms of where we go in the next couple of years, where does a Trumpist party go in terms of the next person who succeeds Trump? And you need to be looking at their statements right now, right? When they come out, if it's a J.D. Vance, a Marco Rubio, whatever, and you need to be looking at Republican legislators, the ones who are still establishment Republicans and the ones who have gone Trumpist. And you need to be looking at Democrats as well, because the other thing is the Democrats are a wide range of folks as well. Mm-hmm. And this is not to let Democrats off the hook. I'd love to have an episode with you on it, which is because actually, and I'm going to say something because I love bringing this out when I get all my fans on social media. I'm not actually a Democrat. I've never been a registered Democrat, and I never would be, because I don't want to tie myself to a particular political party. I've got views that map all over the place. And I'd say, there are things we could talk about in terms of where are the Democrats on healthcare? Where are they in terms of economic issues? Where are they in terms of immigration? Where's the responsible way forward? But for right now, the Democrats are not the biggest threat to America, to the world. The Trump folks are. So don't forget that, folks. Until next week. At least don't forget it until next week and we can talk to you again.
Yeah, absolutely. And well, basically, don't chase the headlines, don't chase the breaking news. Kind of circles back to how we started. Like people worry that, rather saying, oh, this is not the break.
Well, saying you're not a Democrat, does that absolve you of being a globalist? How that work? By saying what you are not, avoids telling people what you are. Never heard of the bloke before. I'm just listening to what he's saying, and there are things in there that are clearly, I'm sorry, but we cannot have a rational conversation about COVID and vaccinations until we're willing to have the conversation of Event 201. We just can't. What was Event 201? That happened just before COVID, which was a dry run of COVID. You can't just throw that that's got nothing to do with it. It's bullshit. It's got everything to do with it. Right? Now we'll come to Australia, completely different topic. Malcolm Roberts promised to investigate the Woodrow Commission. All of a sudden, it's a conspiracy theory. I had a look at it. It was just 28 names scribbled on a piece of paper, and nobody knows who wrote it. Tell Bill Hilton than that. Okay, I'm sorry, but again, that's just what we just take your word for it. We just take your word for it, do we? And everybody else refuses to talk about it, and nobody will talk about it again. I'm sorry, I don't trust you. I don't believe you. See, because people identify as left or right, they're playing identity politics, identifying with the left and identifying with the right. So we've got over here the same argument. So it's how are we still having this fucking stupid argument? Science versus non-science. How about common sense? How about let's just fucking investigate it properly? Let's find out whose stories don't match up. The way that an investigation should be done. Well, there's people lying here. Their stories aren't matching up. And their stories align a little bit too well, word for word. How about we play the your mate just rolled over on your game? Look, your mates can't actually come clean, rolled over on you. And he's told us that you accepted money to push this agenda, or you accepted a donation, you accepted a plan if you push the agenda to open up uranium mines in Australia for offshore mining corporations. Like who? I don't know. What do they use fucking uranium for? Why don't we have nuclear power in Australia? That'd be a waste of uranium. Maybe it's a case of we don't have a way of disposing of it. Without making dirty bombs. We always have to look into the military-industrial complex and how that's being used to push a different agenda altogether. Like the formation of the 10-zone map of the Club of Rome. Everyone wants to go on about oligarchy and oligarchs controlling the world, and oligarchs this and oligarchs that, but nobody wants to name them. Corporate interests, lobbyists. Who do the lobbyists work for? Okay? This is what's retarded. Everyone wants to blame the lobbyists and the politicians being in bed with one another. Okay, who are the lobbyists working for? Cui bono. Who benefits? What ties to the corporations whom they are lobbying for have to other corporations who are lobbying for the same things somewhere else? Are we coming back to Standard Oil, JP Morgan, Unijoint, Bank of International Settlements, Rothschilds, Rockefellers, the Walton family? Trilateral Commission? Like when I mentioned that to Pauline Hanson's face from me to this camera away and she'd had a Tony Abbott fucking meltdown. What? And then she went worse and I actually thought she was going to vomit or something. Pale as buggy. Just no words came out. Just pedaling on a bike with no chain. When I said, because geez, it looks to me like everybody's throwing themselves under the bus to roll out the red carpet. All that all jumping ship, shuffling the chairs on the deck chairs on the Titanic. That's purposely being sunk. It's almost laughable what he said it then. I'm like, now tell us again that you're not a Democrat while you're being a Democrat. Oh wow, that's why I actually don't have a side. He obviously does, and the side's the agenda. It matters not who's in control, because they're not in control. You perceive them to be in control. How's your grocery bill this week? how's your cost of living altogether? Can you fill the fuel tank in your car without pinching pennies or thinking, can I afford to actually even fill it? Do your kids need something that you can't afford, like, I don't know, braces? Are you using your credit card to pay for a Leavers dinner dress? That's just dumb. Are you just hoping that the next party's going to fix everything for you as you're getting hungrier? And how many people took advantage of the fact that sun-grown rice is half price this week at Coles and bought 2 bags? Probably might want to look into things like that. Oh, yeah, I'm reading fantasy books, aren't I?